Hi everyone, so today we're going to have a look at the solution, or a suggested solution, to the horseBarn problem, which is the 2012 free response paper question 3. So let's go and find that paper. Um, 2012 free response question 3. Where is it? And here we go. Okay, so we're told that a software system models a horse barn, and we're told about the horse class. Now don't worry too much at the moment about interfaces if you don't understand that yet. That's fine, we'll get there. But what we do need to know is that the horse class is going to have two methods. These are two accessor methods, getName and getWeight. The getName method of the horse class is going to return a string, and the getWeight method is going to return an integer. So we need to be aware that this relates to the horse class. Now we're going to move into the horseBarn class. We know that a horseBarn stores an array of horse objects, and the reference variable is called spaces. Okay, so this is not a string array, it's not an integer array, it is a horse array. We also know that the horseBarn class has two methods, find horse space and consolidate, and these are the methods that we are going to implement in this problem. The find horse space method takes a string which represents a horse name, and it returns the index of the horse in the horse array that has the same name as name. Okay? And if it can't find a horse with that name, then it's going to return -1. So let's have a quick look at a suggested solution to that problem. First of all, I'm going to show you my design of the horse class. You don't need to write the horse class as part of your problem, but to test a solution using something like Replit, you'll need to develop the horse class. So we know, or we can assume, that every horse has a name and a weight. I've made a simple constructor method here, and these are the two methods that we've just been told about. The getName method, which returns a string, and the getWeight method, which returns an integer. Okay, so this is the horse class, and I need to understand how this works in order to develop the horseBarn class. Now we know that a horseBarn contains a horse array. I'm just going to make that private. A horse array called spaces. I've developed a constructor method, and this is my solution to the find horse space method. What I'm going to do is loop through the spaces array, and for each element in the space array, for example spaces I, this is a reference to a horse object. I know that because spaces is a reference to a horse array. So spaces I is a reference to a horse object. And I know that horse objects allow me to use a method called getName. Right? Every horse object has this method called getName. So I can use that for horse object references. So spaces I is a reference to a horse object, so that means I can call the getName method. getName returns a string. So this is actually a string. So because this is a string, I can use the string class's equals method. So if spaces I.getName.equals name, I'm going to return I, which is the index of the horse object with that name. Okay, so that for loop is going to deal with that for me. If it doesn't find anything with that name, if no object has that name, then the for loop will finish its processing, and if we get this far, we're going to return -1. So that's my solution to the find horse space method. We're now going to look at the consolidate method. So the consolidate method looks at the spaces array and just organizes it so that all of the names are at the front of the array and any nulls are pushed to the back of the array. Okay? So this is my solution to the consolidated method. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new horse array. I'm just going to call it consolidated, and this is going to be a new horse array which has the same length as the spaces array. It's going to be the same size. Okay. Now I'm going to loop through the spaces array, and if an element in the spaces array isn't null, then I'm going to assign it to my consolidated array. So actually I need another variable to help me process the consolidated array. So I'm going to create a variable called x, and I'm going to assign it a value of 0. So if spaces I doesn't equal null, that means that we have a horse object. I'm going to say consolidated x equals spaces I. And I need another line of code. Every time I do that, I need to increment x. So x is controlling how I'm going through this array, and I is controlling how I'm going through the spaces array. Okay? So for example, when I is 0, if that is a horse object, which it is, I'm going to assign that to consolidated 0. Then I'm going to do x++, so we're going to go to consolidated 1. If that's a horse object, which it isn't, well, nothing happens. So then we're going to go to I equals 2. So spaces 2 is a horse object, so I'm going to assign that to consolidated 1, because x is 1. So consolidated 0 is this horse, consolidated 1 is this horse, then we do x++, so now x is equal to 2, and now let's continue looping through the spaces array. I equals 3, nothing happens. I equals 4, nothing happens. I equals 5, that's going to be assigned to consolidated 2. And that's going to be assigned to consolidated 3. And everything else will naturally be null. Okay? So that's how that code works. Now what I'm going to do is make sure that my spaces reference, which is a reference to a horse array, is going to be assigned to this consolidated array. So I'm basically telling spaces to reference this new array. Okay? So now let's go to a main program and just see if this solution works. Remember, consolidate doesn't return anything. It's a void method, so it's not returning anything. It's just updating the spaces array. Let's go back to main. What I've done is I've constructed a reference to a horse array. I've made some horse objects and some nulls just to test it. I've now passed that data into a horseBarn. So there's my horse array reference. So I now have a horseBarn constructed. I'm then going to call the consolidate method. So hopefully that's going to sort the spaces array inside the horseBarn. And then I'm going to call my getSpaces method of the horseBarn class. So in my horseBarn class, I have an accessor method called getSpaces, and that returns a reference to my spaces array, which is a horse array reference. And now that I have that data in my main program, I'm just going to loop through it. I'm using a different kind of for loop. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. But I'm just going to loop through this array and print out the result. And as you can see, I get the names of the horses at the top of the array, and then the nulls come at the end. So that's a solution to the consolidate method of the horseBarn class.